Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today I would like to conclude our discussion of the works that are included in Eric Rohmer's 6 Moral Tales. We have gone through in brief discussion form each of the films except the last one. And so now let us focus our attention on such film, which is the 6th and final film in this sequence of films, 6 Moral Tales. The film in question, of course, is from 1972. And before that, let me show you the Blu-ray set from the Criterion collection of the 6 Moral Tales. And this film from 1972 is known in French as L'amour l'après-midi, or in English as Love in the Afternoon. So this is the Criterion Blu-ray release. This is the Blu-ray set of the 6 Moral Tales, and this in the foreground is the out-of-print DVD release from the Criterion collection. So this is the DVD that comes from the DVD set from the Criterion collection. Unfortunately, this DVD is out of print, but we now have the newer Blu-ray set. This film, Love in the Afternoon, by the way, is given spine number 348 in the collection. And as I say, this is the 6th and final film in the sequence of films, this very fascinating and ambiguous and poetic series of films from Eric Rohmer, 6 Moral Tales. Love in the Afternoon. Now, what can we make of this extraordinary conclusion to this sequence of films? I think from the outset, I think we can recognize that we are also once again dealing with a set of themes and a set of concerns, cinematic concerns, that can be said to be drawn from or otherwise connected to those themes and concerns that we saw the other films dealing with in their own particular ways. And what do I mean by this? Well, we have once again at the center of this film, Love in the Afternoon, like we did with the other films. At the center of the film is a male character, and this time this is Frédéric, and we have his interactions with certain women in his life, and this therefore forms the basic structure of Love in the Afternoon. And we have seen this similar basic structure play itself out, albeit with slight variations, but still the basic integrity of the structure remains more or less constant throughout the films. We have a male character dealing in relationships with either other male characters or other female characters, or a combination thereof. So here we have, I think, the male character dealing primarily with 2 other women. There are other characters here, but there are 2 other women in his life that he has relationships with, and very specific, particular relationships, as expressed in this film. And so we hear his thoughts and ruminations about how he is dealing with these relationships. Now, one of the things, however, that makes this film, I think, stand apart from the rest of the films we've seen up to now is the nature of these relationships, and one in particular. So he is married, right? So he is a married man, and we see him and his relationships and his interactions with the woman that he is married to. And also we see and hear his thoughts. We see him interact, and we see him in the city and viewing other women, seeing other women, observing other women. And one woman in particular that enters his life that is not his wife, which is Chloe. And so we see his interactions with her and how this relationship that is outside of his marriage, how this relationship forms yet another integral part of the exploration of his perspective and his sort of justifications, if you will, for the types of feelings that he has vis-a-vis women. And these feelings perhaps can be described as approaching or otherwise relating to feelings of attraction to the opposite sex, and how he tries to reconcile these feelings even though he is in a marital relationship already, and how therefore he tries to reconcile and justify and intellectualize the fact that he might have certain feelings or feelings of attraction towards other women outside of his marriage. Now, this is very much similar to the types of treatment of thoughts and feelings and actions that I tried to describe in our brief discussion of the prior work, which is called Claire's Knee. The idea of sexual attraction and thought, and how that translates into action. And when we have combinations of those sorts of thoughts and certain types of action, does that really constitute an act of infidelity? Or are these things that we can somehow justify in a way that is consistent with what one might call a moral code, a personal moral code? And so we see that discussion carried through in this film, Love in the Afternoon, very clearly, very succinctly, and very effectively. But there's also a further development of that, because here, as I say, we have a man who is married, and we have a man who is faced with certain choices that deal with the potential of being unfaithful, and this idea of temptation, and the temptation outside of one's marriage, which is based on kind of sexual attraction that grows over time. And so what we have, therefore, is a real a confrontation with a dilemma, and that dilemma is essentially, does one remain faithful, or does one be unfaithful? And if one chooses the latter, in other words, if one chooses to be unfaithful, what does that mean, to be unfaithful in this kind of relationship? Is thought alone enough to constitute acts of infidelity and being unfaithful? Or do we need something more? Even if one thinks these thoughts about other women outside of one's marriage, is that acceptable? Can we justify that in the context of a kind of moral code? Is this in some way an expression of a universal love towards women that is consistent with the notion of love within a marriage and a relationship? Again, these are the kinds of ponderings that we hear and experience as viewers, and I think we, as with the other films, are left to wonder whether this is an actual, earnest, bona fide attempt at trying to, in good faith, justify these thoughts in the context of what might be called a moral code. Again, the moral in the 6 moral tales. So is it that, or is this all illusory? Is this all just for show? Is it all meaningless, right? Because ultimately, is this all just more illusory justification for the carnal desires of men, which are ultimately to remain outside of the concept of a marriage? In other words, the carnal desires and the idea of marriage, are these ultimately irreconcilable? And so I think all of this is here, and it's, as I say, set forth in the context of these very well-defined relationships. And also we have a man at the center of the story, his perceptions of the relationships that he finds himself in as depicted in this film, and also his perceptions of himself and the justifications and intellectualizations that he tries to make to himself, and whether that indeed is has a certain function and purpose, or whether it is illusory. And what is more, what we have here, which is, I think, something that is very much a sort of climactic working of the themes that we've seen up to now, and that is the idea of choice. Because there is very clearly a choice that is being made, or there is a choice that confronts the main character, Frederic, and it's a choice that will be essentially something that will affect him and affect the women that are depicted in these relationships that are depicted in the film. And it's this kind of choice that he is confronted with, which makes this film, I think, very climactic in the whole scheme of the Six Moral Tales. Because, as you know, we have had certain elements of choice displayed in the past films, certain choices that some of the characters have made about maybe wanting to go and engage with relationships with this person rather than that person, or choices with regard to kinds of life decisions, or choices with regards to how to express oneself in reality or in the space that is outside of one's mind. So we have had choices like this. But here we have a very direct choice. We have a very, very direct choice. And it's essentially a choice that confronts this man, and it has grand and very deep ramifications going forward. If he makes one choice over the other, that will have complications and consequences and ramifications. And therefore, all the ruminations and all the philosophy-based justifications and all the thinking and all the pondering all leads up to this particular choice. And by extension, everything that we've seen up to now in the Six Moral Tales, in terms of this justification, in terms of this moralizing, in terms of this trying to apply a kind of codified moral code, a personal codified moral code to the various choices and the various events that confronted the various characters. All of this thinking and dialogue, all of it comes to a head here in this final ultimate choice that confronts the main character here. And thus, I think we see when the character makes his choice and the consequences of that, I think we see what could ultimately be a kind of resolution to not just this film, but to the entire sequence of Six Moral Tales. And when we see this resolution, and when we see the choice play itself out, I think we are left to wonder exactly to what degree everything we have seen up to now really a kind of genuine search for an intellectual truth in the context of this application of a moral code, or was it all illusory, and was it all without any kind of long-lasting meaning? And I think, in other words, this choice that we see and the end result of that plays out in this film has long-lasting ramifications that are existent not just within the context of this film, but within the entire scheme of the Six Moral Tales. And therefore, this film is both ambiguous and also ultimately very, very satisfying. It is such a poetically satisfying way to conclude this entire cycle of films. It does a lot of things that are similar to what we saw in the other films, but then it also frames them in ways that are different, and also deals with different permutations and combinations of different sorts of emotional shifting dynamics that again create a brilliant yet distinct work in the Six Moral Tales. And so when we see this film, let us try to pay attention to how this film is linked with the other films, but also how it's operating in its own world and how it is trying to work out a lot of the themes that perhaps were maybe looked at from a different angle in the other films. Here's another example, and I'll try to end with this, which is this idea of attraction and the idea of sexual attraction and emotional attraction. In many of the other films, this has usually been seen in the context of a unilateral or one-way type of attraction, where we have characters that are in different places in their lives, and they meet, and sometimes, and I'm talking about the past films, and sometimes one character is attracted to another, but the other isn't necessarily on the same level of attraction, and so they don't necessarily meet on the same plane of attraction, but they gradually, there's the potential of them gradually meeting on a plane eventually, and so that forms part of the dialogue of the films that we've seen up to here. Well, here we have that kind of level of attraction, but it is on full display, and I would suggest also that this kind of shifting plane of mutual attraction is one of the key developments of this film, and it forms one of the key structural bases on which the ultimate choice that confronts the main character as part of the sort of climax of this film, the ultimate choice rests. It rests on this notion of whether or not these planes of shifting attraction, feelings of attraction, will meet or they won't. And I think that is such a crucial working of one of the important themes that we have seen up to now. But again, it is once again formulated in a way that really gives a sense of choice and confrontation. And once a choice has been made, the ramifications of that going forward, thus ending the film and thus ending the entire sequence of films that forms the Six Moral Tales. And so with that, my friends, this is a really a poetic work. There are so many moments of visual poetry and so many surprises as well that I don't want to go into too many details here, but there are some really quite effective surprises and ways in which certain, how should I put it, there are certain ways in which links of connectivity are established. And those links of connectivity really form the basis of viewing this work, not just on its own, but also in the grand scheme of the Six Moral Tales. And it is a brilliant poetic depiction of the working out of these themes and ideas that essentially come down to the very core of attraction and interaction between men and women. So this is the film L'amour l'après-midi, or Love in the Afternoon, from 1972. This is the sixth film in Eric Rohmer's Six Moral Tales. Okay, my friends, so that's it. So please, if you are interested, please explore the works of Eric Rohmer, and please explore the works of the Six Moral Tales. I have done my best to try to discuss each of the films to the extent possible, but also just leaving enough undiscussed so you can watch the films and you can enjoy them, and you can also engage with them at your own pace and at your own leisure. So please, if you can, I would love to hear your thoughts and comments about this and other works in the Eric Rohmer's Six Moral Tales cycle of films. I'd always love to hear what it is you have to say. Okay, my friends, so thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Eric Rohmer's Six Moral Tales. I hope you enjoyed it, my friends. And until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you once again, and cheers.